Fauci fallout over Washington. The United States keeps hitting Iran. Ceuta migrant crisis and Chinese election interference. Greetings, humanity. Let's grok the news. We cover the world's headlines, but first, a deep dive into the most important story in the world today. Dateline, Washington, D.C. Former National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease Director Dr. Anthony Fauci appeared Wednesday before the Republican-led Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee and invoked Fifth Amendment protections against self-incrimination more than 100 times. The hearing, chaired by Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, focused on Fauci's role in the COVID-19 pandemic response, the virus origins, gain-of-function research, and discrepancies between his public statements and private records. Fauci, now 85, told the panel at the outset that under advice of counsel, he would refrain from answering questions. He repeated a nearly identical 24-word statement each time senators asked him anything, even the color of his tie. Committee Chair Rand Paul had subpoenaed Fauci and released more than 1,100 pages from the doctor's diary. Senators questioned him about lab leak theories, funding of research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology in China, school closures, mask guidance, and his earlier congressional testimony. Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri and others criticized pandemic policies. At one point, Paul ordered Fauci's attorney, David Schluter, removed from the hearing room after the lawyer continued to interject. Fauci sat largely silent for more than 2 hours while lawmakers from both parties spoke. Paul announced he intends to seek a contempt-of-Congress vote against Fauci next week. Florida's Attorney General has separately indicated plans to pursue related documents that could test the reach of a prior presidential pardon. President Donald Trump has stated he will respect the pardon allegedly signed by former President Joe Biden, even while expressing doubts about the use of the auto pen by a president with declining mental faculties on the day he was leaving office. Public reaction split among the usual lines. Supporters of Fauci, worshippers of Fauci, this observer would argue. Well, the supporters of Fauci say the hearing was just political theater that risks deterring scientists from government service. Critics said that the blanket refusal to answer left key questions about pandemic decision-making unresolved more than 6 years after the outbreak began. The session was broadcast live on C-SPAN and was covered extensively by major networks. As of this morning, no new formal charges have yet been filed, but the contempt process remains active and state-level inquiries continue. The hearing marks the latest chapter in years of congressional scrutiny of the federal COVID-19 response. Fauci retired from the government service in 2022 after nearly 4 decades at the National Institutes of Health. Well, if you've made it this far, please like and subscribe. I'm Robert Gardner, using GROK each weekday to truthfully summarize the news, and I serve it up with my opinion, as you can tell, and you can tell my opinion from the facts. I make that clear. We review a roundup of the most critical reports in the world right after this. God with Us, the story of Jesus, blends the Gospels into one inspired narrative. Divided into daily Bible studies, this book presents the story of Jesus from his birth to his ascension. Find God with Us by me, Robert Gardner, at Amazon.com. Now, we grok the news with headlines from around the world. Dateline, Washington, D.C. President Trump announced a phased agreement for Hamas and other armed groups in Gaza to disarm completely. Israeli forces would withdraw as disarmament advances, followed by an international stabilization force. Israel expressed skepticism, while Hamas conditioned compliance on Israeli steps. This observer hopes that this is not just another case of dealing with Iranian lies, transigence, and simply patience, waiting for the West to falter, fail, give up, or divert its attention elsewhere, while the jihad continues. Dateline Tampa, Florida. U.S. Central Command forces struck dozens of Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps targets in Iran after IRGC ballistic missiles had targeted American bases the day before. All incoming missiles were intercepted. Strike hit command centers, missile facilities, and coastal sites amid ongoing conflict affecting Gulf oil routes. The president has not yet authorized large-scale bombing of interior infrastructure. Yet. Dateline Kiev. Ukrainian forces reported Russian combat losses have now reached 1.45 million personnel. Recent Russian missile and drone strikes killed at least 8 civilians, including a family of 6. President Trump said that he remains unsure about authorizing Ukraine to produce Patriot missiles domestically. This observer would tell Trump to follow his first instincts and just stay out of this. Dateline Manila in the Philippines. A U.S.-backed CSAT's autonomous drone filmed a Chinese-type 052D destroyer inside the Philippine exclusive economic zone northwest of Luzon, and it was there without detection otherwise. The Philippines urged de-escalation while China denied any knowledge of this encounter. It happened in June. Dateline Ceuta, Spain. Thousands of migrants, thousands, swam or climbed into the Spanish North African enclave of Ceuta from Morocco. Authorities deployed military forces after the reception centers were overwhelmed, especially for the unaccompanied minors, among the thousands upon thousands of young men swarming the coast. Photos and videos were entitled Invasion, as thousands of young men from North Africa sprinted across the Spanish beaches in waves not seen since the D-Day invasion. Dateline Calais, France. British Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philip filmed French officers on a northern France beach who said, they could only warn, not stop, a migrant boat carrying about 100 people. 752 migrants reached the United Kingdom that same day, despite a major bilateral deal with France to stop allowing them to cross the Channel. A deal with France? Well, what did you expect? Dateline, Washington, D.C. The Department of Homeland Security announced 14 consecutive months of zero releases at the southern border. A new USCIS rule will route up to 444,000 asylum cases directly to the immigration judges, bypassing asylum officer interviews. Time to expedite, streamline, and remigrate these invaders. Dateline Beijing. China's official manufacturing purchasing managers index fell to 49.2 in July, the first contraction since February. Weaker new orders and soft domestic demand drove the drop. Non-manufacturing activity also slipped. China's mighty economy stumbling. Dateline Seoul. South Korea's Kospi Index suffered its worst monthly decline on record in July, including an 11% single-day crash, before staging a nearly 18% rebound on Friday. It's not all bad news, folks. Regulators reviewed a possible temporary short-selling ban. This observer has always hated the idea of short-selling. This isn't capitalism. This is speculation. Dateline, Brussels, Belgium. Eurozone gross domestic product rose 0.4% in the second quarter, which beat the forecasts, as meager and anemic as that was. Spain led with 0.7% growth. You know, a lot of growth that they talk about often has to do with population increase. Spain's population increase is from illegal invasion. The expansion held despite energy disruptions linked to Middle East tensions. Dateline, Washington, D.C. President Donald Trump's July 16th primetime address and subsequent White House document releases detailed China's acquisition of roughly 220 million American voter files. That's nearly all of them. From 18 different states since 2020. Intelligence assessments also confirmed adversaries can compromise electronic voting systems. The Department of Homeland Security identified about 278,000 non-citizens on state rolls in just those 18 states. Other states are facing federal law enforcement action for so far refusing to comply with revealing their voter rolls. Dateline, well, China's got them. Why can't the federal government? Dateline, Bamako, Mali. Human Rights Watch reported that Russia's Africa Corps carried out airstrikes in central Mali on June 15th that killed 8 civilians, including 3 children, in an allegedly indiscriminate attack for no reason whatsoever on a village in Mali. This observer can tell you that Human Rights Watch is not a reliable source, biased heavily in favor of Islamic extremists wherever they are. In this case, the government of Mali has asked the Russians to help them uproot the jihadists among them. The civilians were evidently part of a village chief's family and were used as a typical human shield by the terrorists. Move over, Israel. Time for Russia to join you on this bench of propaganda. Dateline, Santa Cruz. Bolivian prosecutors in the Eastern Department of Santa Cruz issued a fresh warrant Thursday for former President Evo Morales over his alleged role in anti-government protests. You know, the ones that rocked the nation during May and June of this year. Dateline, Bogota, Colombia. Right-wing candidate Abelardo de la Espriella narrowly defeated leftist, that is to say communist, Ivan Cepeda in Colombia's presidential runoff. In Peru, Keiko Fujimori won a similarly tight contest against another Marxist. Both victories signal a regional shift toward the right. Observers have noted that after the Trump administration cut off USAID disbursements to Marxist front organizations around the world, that the right wing has begun winning elections again. Dateline, well, this is a global dateline. Get ready for this. Earth Overshoot Day. Have you heard of that? This is the first time this observer has heard of it. Well, that arrived today. It is the earliest date on record for this. They don't tell us how long these records go back. It's got to be a recent thing. Humanity's demand now equals 1.73 planets, according to the Global Footprint Network. The United Nations called for faster action on renewables and waste. Well, in other words, if you logically extrapolate, what this means is that we need about half as many people on the planet as we have. I'm going to have a long talk this weekend with GROK about what is news and what is United Nations communist propaganda. Essentially, the godless communists that we host in New York are saying that God didn't know what he was doing. We need another planet. Of course, now that this observer thinks about it, Elon Musk also thinks we need another planet. Well, maybe we will one day, but these Marxist bureaucrats have no idea just how big, beautiful, and productive the world really is if you're not a Marxist. Dateline, Abuja, Nigeria. A federal committee in the African nation has admitted nearly 100 years of failed due diligence on civil service recruitment waivers. Officials linked the gaps to broader governance problems while advancing plans for a $1 trillion economy. Dateline, Nairobi. Kenyan media and business groups warned that a proposed local content bill could threaten foreign investment and jobs. Political influence around President William Ruto continues to shift amid the debate. Dateline, Accra. Ghana's Supreme Court has issued a landmark ruling that bans the use of delegate voting in political party elections and strictly prohibits cash handouts or similar inducements, reflecting wider regional efforts to strengthen electoral integrity. And Dateline New Delhi. Indian police have registered a case against the head of Meta's India operations over Facebook videos that targeted Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The complaint centers on content that are alleged to violate local laws. I thank you for listening. Please join me Monday to once again GROK the News. I'm Robert Gardner. Godspeed and God bless.